Open with the raw, unspoken question every viewer quietly carries. Did an avoidant ever really feel what they lost, or is the pain one-sided? This section lives inside the curiosity gap. The psychological beat is establishing emotional stakes before any concept lands. The retention hook is built around a promise. By the end of the video, the viewer will understand the truth avoidants themselves cannot easily put into words. Matthew Hussey style here means speaking directly to the viewer's wound with warmth, not clinical distance. End the section with the first quiet shock that the avoidant isn't cold, they are terrified of depth. Move into the first hours and days after the loss. The psychological beat is the surface presentation. The avoidant appears unbothered, rational, even relieved. This section uses attachment theory to explain the deactivation strategy, the subconscious shutdown that protects an avoidant from being overwhelmed by feelings they were never taught to hold. The retention hook is the realization that the calm is not peace. It is protection. The viewer is invited to question what they themselves may have mistaken for strength inside themselves. No dramatic claims, just one steady, devastating truth at a time. Shift into what is happening inside the avoidant while the outside stays quiet. This section introduces the real psychological machinery, the push-pull wiring, the fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant contrasts, and the deep paradox that the more someone truly loved them, the more the avoidant felt internally destabilized. Beat. The subconscious does not let the loss disappear. It reroutes it. The retention hook is the first emotional trigger of the video, the moment where viewers recognize that what the avoidant showed was never the full story. This is the delayed emotional earthquake. The psychological beat explains why the deepest pain for an avoidant rarely hits at the time of the breakup. It arrives weeks, months, or even years later, often triggered by something small. Attachment theory grounds this. The nervous system finally lowers its guard, and the suppressed flood of feeling arrives all at once. The retention hook is the shocking revelation that what an avoidant experiences in this collapse is closer in intensity to grief than most people ever realize. They simply do it alone. The return, the silence, and the two roads they take move into outcomes. Some avoidants come back, some vanish forever, and the determinant is not love, it is wiring. This section explains why some avoidants circle back long after the breakup, sends a single message that says very little on the surface, but carries the entire weight of what they never said. The psychological beat is teaching viewers the difference between an avoidant's real return and a comfort-seeking re-entry. The retention hook is practical. Viewers will finally know what a true avoidant return looks like, versus what is only emotional relapsing. Now the deepest layer. The psychological beat traces the avoidance response back to its origin. Why someone who truly loved them felt more dangerous than someone who held back. This introduces early attachment wiring, the fear of engulfment, the nervous system reading intimacy as loss of self. The retention hook is the revelation that the avoidance withdrawal was never about the partner's worth. It was about the partner's closeness. The viewer walks away understanding that being deeply loved activated the avoidant's deepest safety alarm. The landing. The psychological beat is returning the focus to the viewer. What this means for anyone who ever loved an avoidant, who ever waited, who ever wondered if they were enough. This section introduces the insight. Their love was not wasted, but their waiting was. The retention hook is the final emotional truth. The viewer closes the video feeling seen, lighter, and clear about what they will no longer accept, without ever needing to name expert, study, or narrator along the way. Matthew Hussey style throughout. Warm, direct, and quietly devastating in delivery. Outline complete. Standing by for your instruction to write section 1. Give me script from section 1 to 7. Have you ever loved someone who never once made it easy to stay? Someone who could hold you close in one moment and vanish into themselves in the next? Someone who could look you in the eye and tell you they cared, and then go silent for 3 days, and then come back like nothing happened? If that question just hit you somewhere quietly, do not scroll past it. Stay with this, because what I am about to walk you through is going to change the way you understand not just them, but yourself forever. There is a painful question that almost no one is willing to ask out loud after a relationship like this ends. It sits underneath the anger. It sits underneath the hurt. It sits underneath the part of you that keeps replaying old conversations and trying to figure out where it went wrong. That question is this: did it actually mean anything to them? When someone with an avoidant attachment walks away from you, when they disappear, when they pull back just as you finally felt safe, the doubt is almost unbearable. You begin to wonder whether the version of them you fell in love with was ever real. You wonder if they ever felt what you felt. You wonder if you poured your heart into someone who quietly stood there and watched it spill. I want you to hear this clearly. If that has been your story, then what I am about to share with you is not going to feel like a mystery. It is going to feel like a relief. Because the truth about how an avoidant responds after losing someone who truly loved them is not what most people think. It is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is not a sign that you never mattered. It is something far more complicated, far more human, and far more painful than that. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand it so clearly that you will never again waste your nights wondering whether your love was wasted. The reason this matters is because so many of us have lived inside the wrong story. We have told ourselves that we were foolish for caring so much. We have told ourselves that we should have seen the signs. We have told ourselves that any person who could pull away like that must not have truly loved us in the first place. And that story keeps us stuck. That story keeps us replaying. That story keeps us from healing. So tonight, in the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through what actually happens on the inside of someone whose attachment system has been wired this way. And I'm not going to do it from a clinical distance. I'm going to do it from the level of human truth. Because once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Before we go further, I want you to notice something. You are already paying attention. You are already leaning in. That is because part of you has been waiting for an explanation that never came from them. You have been waiting for an explanation that never came from the breakup itself. You have been waiting for someone to put language to something you felt, but could never quite prove. That is what this video is for. And there is one specific moment, one specific reaction, one specific thing an avoidant does in the weeks and months after losing the right person that is going to break this open for you. Stay with me, because we are about to walk into it. And once you see it, you are going to understand the full story of what happened to you, and to them, and to the love you shared. Right after the breakup, in those first hours and those first days, an avoidant can seem almost impossibly steady. Friends might even comment on how well they are handling it. They go back to work. They post normal things. They laugh in the right places. They may even tell mutual acquaintances that they are fine, and they will sound convincing when they say it. From the outside, it looks like resilience. It looks like someone who simply moved on. That is the version you were shown. And that is the version that made you question everything you were feeling on your own end. But there is a much deeper story happening underneath. The calm you saw was not peace. It was a survival strategy. The avoidant nervous system, when it senses an emotional intensity it cannot regulate, does not process that intensity in the open. It shuts the door. It minimizes. It looks for distractions. It throws itself into work, into social plans, into anything that keeps the mind just busy enough to avoid the flood waiting underneath. This is what attachment theory calls deactivation. It is the body's way of protecting a person who never learned how to hold deep feeling without becoming overwhelmed by it. And I want you to understand this gently, because it matters. The avoidant is not performing this on purpose. They are not sitting there deciding to be cold. They are running an old unconscious program. Somewhere in their history, deep feeling became unsafe. Maybe it was modeled that way. Maybe it was punished. Maybe it was simply never welcomed. So when someone truly loving walks close, when someone truly loving starts demanding emotional presence, the avoidance system reads that closeness not as safety but as threat. And the early response to threat is shut down. That is why the first days look so shockingly calm. Their system has already flipped the switch. The door is closed. The feelings are not gone. They are simply parked in a place the avoidant does not have to face. They will tell themselves they made the right decision. They will tell themselves they were suffocating. They will tell themselves this is finally freedom, and they will believe it. For now, this is where so many people who love them begin to lose themselves, because they watch this calm and they think, that is how easy it was for them. That is how little it meant. They start to feel foolish for how hard they are taking it. They start to wonder if their own attachment style is the problem. They start to compare their grief to the avoidant's composure, and they feel small inside that comparison. I want you to hear me here. That comparison is unfair. You are comparing your open heart to a sealed one. You are comparing a nervous system that processes emotion in real time to a nervous system that stores it for later. You were not weak. You were wired to feel. And what looked like their strength was, in truth, their coping. And coping is not the same as feeling, not even close. The first phase of this story is, in many ways, the cruelest. It is the phase where the avoidant still sounds sure of themselves. They will not yet have the wobble. They will not yet have the quiet panic. They will not yet have the missing. That part is coming. And when it arrives, it will arrive in a way that very few people ever see. We are about to go there now, because this is the part of the story that nobody tells you. And it is the part that finally makes everything make sense. While the outside of an avoidant stays perfectly composed, something very different is happening on the inside. It is not loud. It does not look like panic. It does not look like tears. It looks like a low, steady hum of tension running underneath everything they do. It looks like restless distraction. It looks like picking up the phone and putting it back down. It looks like drifting into old memories and then immediately pulling away from them. This is not healing. This is the subconscious trying to route around pain it cannot yet process. One of the most important things to understand here is that avoidants are not all the same. There are dismissive avoidants and there are fearful avoidants, and the way this storm moves is different for each. A dismissive avoidant is more likely to lean harder into the false calm. They will tell themselves the relationship was never that deep. They will minimize the love. They will convince themselves that what they felt was not as significant as it actually was. But underneath that minimizing, the nervous system is still registering the loss. A fearful avoidant is even more complicated because they are closer to feeling and farther from expressing it. They want to reach out. They start messages they never send. They hover near your social media. They oscillate between longing and retreat so fast that even they cannot explain it to themselves. But here is what the research on attachment patterns makes painfully clear. The deeper the love was, the more the avoidant feels internally destabilized. This is a truth most people do not expect. We assume that if someone really loved us, they would feel our absence deeply and quickly. But for an avoidant, deep love registers as a threat. The closer the partner got, the more activated the avoidant's protective system became. So when the loss finally arrives, the avoidant does not just lose a relationship. They lose the very thing their nervous system was using all that energy to defend against. The thing they were protecting themselves from was intimacy. And intimacy is exactly what is now gone. This storm does not behave like normal grief. Normal grief moves in waves. It comes up, it breaks, it releases. For an avoidant, the grief is compressed. It is shoved beneath surface activity. It leaks sideways. It shows up as irritability. It shows up as picking fights with people who had nothing to do with the breakup. It shows up as insomnia that they cannot explain. It shows up as a sudden irrational dislike of places or songs or habits that used to remind them of the partner. These are not coincidences. They are the unconscious trying to make the pain small enough to bear and failing. You see this pattern over and over again in people who love avoidance. The avoidant appears to be fine, even thriving, while quietly coming apart at the seams in ways they themselves cannot name. They tell themselves they are over it. They tell themselves they moved on clean. And somewhere they cannot reach, a different story is being recorded in the body. That story is patient. It is going to surface. And when it does, it is going to be heavier than anyone around them will be prepared for. We are going to look at exactly how that surfaces next and why it is so often delayed until it feels, to everyone watching, like it came out of nowhere. Months can pass. Sometimes more than a year can pass. And then something small happens. A song, a smell, a phrase, walking past a street that meant nothing before. Seeing someone in a crowd who wears the same coat. And suddenly the avoidant is on their knees, not in public, not where anyone would notice, but somewhere private. The flood arrives, all at once. Every feeling they thought they had successfully filed away lands at once. And they do not know what to do with it, because they were taught, on some fundamental level, that feelings of this depth are not the kind of thing they are allowed to have. This is what delayed grief does inside an avoidant nervous system. The shutdown that protected them right after the breakup was effective in the short term. It kept them functional. It kept them moving. But it had a hidden cost. The cost is that none of the feeling was actually processed. None of it was metabolized. It was merely deferred. And the body's accounting system for emotional debt does not forget. It collects quietly, patiently, until something cracks the wall. When that wall cracks, the experience is not sadness the way most people describe sadness. It is a kind of internal earthquake. The avoidant may cry in a way they have not cried since childhood. They may replay entire conversations with brutal precision. They may feel shame for not having said the things they should have said when they had the chance. And here is the painful part that no one really wants to hear. By the time this collapse happens, it is often too late to do anything with it. The relationship may be gone. The partner may have moved on. The opportunity that existed when the feelings were still accessible has already closed. The avoidant is left in the strange and terrible position of feeling what they cannot act on. They are carrying the full weight of the loss at the exact moment when there is nowhere to put it down. I want you to sit with that for a moment because it explains something I think you already know if you are watching this. The version of the avoidant you remember. The version who seemed calm and detached and free in those first months after the breakup was not the final version. They were simply earlier in their own process. And yes, this means that the love you gave them did land. It did matter. It registered. It was stored. They were simply not capable of holding it in real time. That is not a justification. That is not a clean excuse for the pain they caused you. But it is the truth of what was happening on the other side of the silence you experienced. This collapse is the moment the avoidant finally understands what they walked away from. And the way they handle that understanding is the next chapter of this story. Some of them will reach out. Some of them will never reach out. And what determines which path they take has almost nothing to do with how much they loved you, and almost everything to do with the wiring they still have not rewired. We are about to look at that next, and at the difference between a real return and an emotional relapse. Because that distinction might be the most important thing you take away from this entire video. When the collapse finally comes, the avoidant is standing at a fork. On one side, the road of genuine return. On the other, the road of emotional relapse. Most people cannot tell the difference between these two. That is why so many people who love avoidance end up hurt twice. They receive a message or a callback or a sudden appearance on a Tuesday afternoon, and they assume it is the breakthrough they had been waiting for. They assume the avoidant has finally woken up. They assume the lights are back on. And what happens next breaks them worse than the original breakup. An emotional relapse is not return. It is a comfort-seeking reaction to the collapse. It happens when the avoidant is flooded and needs somewhere to put the feeling. They will reach out, not because they have done the work, not because they have learned how to regulate their own nervous system, not because they are suddenly ready to hold what you tried to give them. They will reach out because your memory has become a kind of emotional sedative. You are the only person whose presence once made them feel that kind of deep, destabilizing closeness. And now that the feeling is unlocked, your name is the first place the avoidant instinctively goes to find relief. That is not love returning. That is pain looking for its original shape. A genuine return looks nothing like that. It is slow, it is awkward, it is full of humility. The avoidant who is actually returning has had to sit for a long, uncomfortable stretch with what they did. They have had to look at the patterns they repeated, the closeness they fled from, the partner they punished for loving them well. That work changes the way they reach out. They do not romanticize the past. They do not minimize what they did. They are not handing you a polished explanation. They are handing you something more honest. They are handing you the messy truth of their limits and a willingness to grow past them. The sad truth about this is that most avoidants who reconnect are not on the second road. They are on the first. They are reaching out because the collapse hit and they need somewhere to put it. They are seeking a temporary emotional landing pad. And when they get it, when you respond, when you let them back in even for a little while, the flooding settles. The avoidant feels better. The nervous system returns to baseline. And then, almost without exception, the old pattern reasserts itself. The same withdrawal, the same silence, the same confusing mix of closeness and distance. You are not witnessing growth. You are witnessing the loop reset. This is the part of the story where I want to protect you, because I think you already know where this lands. You cannot love someone into capacity. You cannot wait someone into readiness. You cannot respond to every quiet knock at your door and still keep your center intact. The avoidance return is only trustworthy if it is built on rewired attachment, not on a momentary inability to bear the loss. And that distinction is something most people only learn the hard way. We are about to go back to the origin of all of it now, because there is a piece of this story that will explain exactly why genuine closeness felt so dangerous to them in the first place. And once you see it, you will understand your own role in this dynamic more clearly than you ever have before. Now we are at the place that changes everything, because nothing about the avoidance behavior makes sense until you understand what their nervous system was doing with your love the entire time you were giving it. And what it was doing was reading it as threat, not because your love was wrong, not because you were too much, but because their early wiring taught them, somewhere very deep, that closeness is the place where they get hurt. Think back for a moment to where this all started. For an avoidant, intimacy was never something modeled as safe. In childhood, the people who were supposed to hold their feeling either dismissed it, ignored it, punished it, or simply overwhelmed them with their own emotional instability. So the child learned a survival rule: don't depend, don't lean, don't let yourself be seen. If the toddler cried and no one came, the lesson was not that no one cared. The lesson was that needing someone is dangerous. That lesson does not stay in childhood. It moves into their 20s. It moves into their 30s. It moves into every room they walk into with another human being. When you met them, you were doing something very simple. You were showing up. You were present. You were consistent. You were paying attention. You were saying things like, I see you, so I want you, I am here. And on the surface, the avoidant responded to all of that with what looked like pleasure. They leaned in. They softened. They told you things they had not told anyone in years. And in those moments, the love felt real, because it was. But underneath that love, something was happening inside their body. The nervous system was beginning to register proximity as erosion of self. That is what engulfment feels like from the inside of an avoidant. It is not that they cannot feel love. They can feel it so deeply that it starts to threaten, the very identity they built to protect themselves. This is the piece most people never understand. The avoidance withdrawal was never about your worth. It was never about whether you were the right partner. It was never about whether they found you attractive or interesting or valuable. Their withdrawal was about your closeness. The more you loved them, the more their system screamed that they were about to disappear inside that love. So they pulled back, not because they did not want you, because they wanted you too much for a system that does not know how to hold that much safely. This is also why their mixed signals are so confusing. They are not playing games. They are not leading you on for entertainment. They are caught between two completely real internal experiences at the same time. They want you. They are terrified of you. They miss you the second you leave, and they panic the second you come back. That is not manipulation. That is internal war, and they are losing the war every single day they stay in it. You deserve to know that. You deserve to know that your love did land. It landed in a system that was never taught how to hold it. That is not your failure. That is the inheritance they were handed before they ever met you. And the more clearly you see that, the more clearly you can see something even more important. You cannot be the solution to a wound you did not create. You cannot love someone past the early warning their body keeps repeating every time you come close. Their wiring is not about you. Their wiring is about them. And the biggest decision you will ever make about this person is what you decide to do with that knowledge. So let me bring you all the way back to where we started. The question you carried into this video, the question underneath all the other questions. Did I mean anything? Did it matter? Was I just a season they walked through? And I want to answer that question directly now, because you have earned it, and because you deserve to walk away from this video with something steady in your hands. Here is the truth. You were not a season. You were the place where the avoidance heart finally woke up enough to feel something it had spent a lifetime running from. That is not small. That is not dismissible. That is not something you should be embarrassed about. You loved someone with depth. You loved someone with consistency. You did not protect yourself from loving them because you wanted to play it safe. You loved them because you believed they were worth the risk. And that belief was not wrong. It was simply aimed at a person who did not yet know how to hold what you were offering. But here is what I really want you to take with you. Your love was not wasted. Your waiting was. The moments you replayed the conversation, trying to figure out what you said wrong. The nights you checked their social media hoping for a sign. The mornings you woke up and felt your stomach drop because the silence was still there. The version of you that begged for clarity from someone who was incapable of giving it. That is where the cost lived. Not in the love itself, in the waiting. You are not meant to spend your life waiting for someone else to find the capacity they have not yet built. You are not meant to keep your heart on hold for a person who, every time they come close, treats your closeness like a threat. That is not love. That is a hostage situation dressed up as a relationship. And you have every right, after everything you have been through, to walk away from it with your head held high. The truth you carry forward is this. You learn to love with depth. Do not trade that for shallowness because someone could not hold it. You learn to show up with consistency. Do not punish yourself for that by chasing someone whose nervous system treats consistency like an invasion. You learn that love requires honesty and presence. Do not apologize for that. Do not soften it. Do not shrink it down to fit inside someone else's fear of being truly known. If the right person ever comes into your life, and they are out there, they will not flinch when you love them deeply. They will not pull away when you show up. They will not vanish when you get close. They will meet you there. And if you ever find yourself waiting again, waiting for a message, waiting for a sign, waiting for someone to finally feel what you already feel, let this video be the moment you stop. Not because love was a mistake, but because waiting for someone who cannot meet you is a mistake you only have to make once. I want you to take a breath right now. I want you to feel your feet on the ground. I want you to leave this video knowing more about yourself than you knew when you came in. Because you came in wondering whether they felt it. And you are leaving knowing that the question was never really about them. It was always about whether you were ready to stop waiting for someone who could never show up the way you deserved. If this video helped you feel something you have been carrying alone for too long, leave me a comment with the word "seen." I read every single one. And if you know someone who is still waiting for an avoidant who has not come back, send this to them today. They do not need another month of silence. They need to hear this. I will see you in the next one.